Gotta get the right, okay. Shut up, we can do this. Hey there poetry pals, welcome back to another video. This week I'm going to show you how to write a poem for a wedding. I thought that I wrote short poems until I had to write a poem that fit on a size 3 pair of Vans, and even now I'm worried that this isn't going to work. But we're gonna do it. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. But before we go any further, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and comment down below what brought you to this video today. It really pleases the algorithm gods and helps small channels like me get found. And while we're on the subject, why don't you follow me on social media? I am at Josie Alford Poet on all the things. Okay, so it's a well-known thing that when your family and friends learn you're a poet, you'll get asked to write poems or perform poems at major family events. And if you get really good at it, you might get asked by strangers to do it as well. At which point you should start asking them for money, by the way. Anyway, my first time doing it was actually at my dad's funeral, but we're not talking about funerals today, we're talking about wedding poems. P.S. comment down below if you want a video on how to write a funeral poem. Turns out, pretty good at it. Anyway, a couple of years ago, my pal Molly asked me to write a poem for her wedding to go on her trainers for the evening. I said yes, so she ordered some white slip-on Vans and some fabric pens and got them delivered to my house. These arrived right at the beginning of lockdown, and actually, technically, they got delivered to a neighbour by accident and I got to meet some guy in a flat down the road. Nice man. So in this video, I'm going to go through my process of writing a poem, giving you some advice on how to do it, answering your questions, and at the very end, I'm going to share the poem with you. But before we properly get started, I also was asked to write a speech on behalf of the bridesmaids, and if you're interested in learning how to write a wedding speech, I know that I googled it a couple of times. If that's something that you would like me to make a video about, how I went through that, comment down below. So the things you need to comment below, by the way, are what brought you to this video, whether you want a funeral poem or not, as in a how to write a funeral poem, and whether you want a how to write a wedding speech thing. As I said, Molly asked me to do this nearly 2 years ago. Originally, she was meant to be getting married in October 2020, but had to delay it because of COVID. Happens to the best of us, am I right? Watch my wedding planning video and why everything sucks. So she ended up doing it in September 2021. Why is this relevant to my process? Well, it turns out that a key part of my process is procrastinating right up until the last minute. As soon as those shoes arrived on my doorstep, they went in the back of my cupboard and I didn't touch them I didn't actually touch the trainers until the day before the wedding. Be ready for some chaotic energy later on in this video. So my first proper step happened in about August when I messaged my pal Beth. I've had Beth on the channel before, but for those of you who don't know, Beth does this fabulous thing called Poetry Machine, which she takes to different events and locations and writes people bespoke, personalised poems after just a few minutes of conversation. You can check her out, I'll put her links in the description below. I knew that I wanted to base my poem on stuff that the couple, my friends, said, so I asked Beth for a list of questions that would be useful to ask. Here's the one she gave me. 1. What words come to mind when you think of each other? 2. Can you describe the time you met? What drew you to each other? 3. Any memories, moments or feelings that come to mind of your early days? 4. How did your relationship build as you spent more time together? 5. Any other experiences you've had together that you'd like to share? 6. What would you like the poem to get across most of all? 7. Anything else you'd like to say? 8. What places have you been, favourite journeys, etc. And 9. Wedding song. Question 8 was based on the fact that she wanted me to write these on a pair of shoes, so we were talking about journeys and travelling. And actually question 9 was a recommendation from someone on Twitter because I panic tweeted being like, I've got to write a poem for this and I have no idea what I'm doing, any advice? And someone recommended thinking about their first dance together, so that was good. Beth also said, you could also ask them to list places where they've been together, places that feel important to them, and structure the piece around points in the journey, ending up with the wedding venue. But that's just one way to do it. Go with your instincts and allow themes to emerge. Avoid questions like, what is the most important time you've spent together, as people tend to get stuck and feel pressured. Also, remember that they've asked you to write the poem because they love your style of poetry, so don't try to write in any particular style. I know the feeling of writing for a wedding can feel a bit pressurised. You'll be great. I personally really liked the idea of this journey from where they met to all the different locations ending at the wedding venue. The main problem with that, and the reason I didn't end up going for it, was she has size 3 feet and I'm writing the poem on a pair of shoes. I think the only way I could have made that work is if I designed it like a timeline and each place had a haiku, but again, size 3 feet. So that's actually a really strong idea for a wedding poem, and if anyone wants to borrow that idea, by all means do. But if you do share it on social media, tag this video and share it, yeah? Share the love! So after I got my list of questions written down, I went to meet with Molly and James. They live close by to me, so I went over and I got made lots of cups of tea while I sat down with them. I decided to record the conversation on my phone, whilst also taking notes. What this meant is that I was able to not be obsessively taking notes all the time, which kind of made the conversation feel a bit pressured, but I was able to just engage in conversation with them. Bearing in mind, one thing I did found was that question 1, which is what Beth gave me, which was what words come to mind when you think of each other, was too strong to start with, at least for Molly and James, so that one ended up being the last question that I asked them to answer. A bit of advice for you if you're writing this for friends or strangers, remember that these conversations can happen online, but I do recommend it being a conversation, so make it like a phone call or a video call, because I think the organic conversation is where the little nuggets of gold come out. Whereas if you just sent them all over in an email, maybe those little conversational nuggets don't come out. One of the cool things about having it in conversation is like people just using their own words right then and there. And an example of a nugget for me was that when I was asking them how their relationship developed, they both just said, well, it just fit. As a couple, they went through some really tough times quite early on in their relationship. I'm talking a matter of days. And after they'd gone through all of that, normality just, like, I think one of the phrases they said was, it just felt normal straight away. And then I think the other person said, it just fit. So that was some really nice bits, which I'm not sure I would have got across I'm not sure I would have got that if I'd sent it over in an email and asked them to write out their answers, which is why I think having a conversation is important. So if you can arrange a virtual meeting, if you can't meet them in person, then I would recommend doing that. So then I did my research. I went off and watched their favourite film, Nightmare Before Christmas, and I also looked up the lyrics for a few of their favourite songs. Okay Google, play. Yeah, I'm just gonna tell you the story of how they met because it's super cute and I don't explicitly reference it in the poem, but they actually met on Halloween when he was dressed as Jack and she was dressed as Sally, and they hadn't coordinated that because that's just the night they met, but they met dressed in a couple's costume. So, a favourite part of my research was watching Nightmare Before Christmas. It was super cute, and I made sure to use a few of the lyrics of Sally's song in particular I used bits of that in the poem as well. And I made sure to write down my favourite lyrics of any of the favourite songs that they've mentioned, which included I Got Love by the King Blues, I Miss You by Blink-182, and Sally's song, which is like the closing song. Well, no, she's got a bit earlier on, but like the closing song of Nightmare Before Christmas. Next up, I did a mind map. Here is my mind map. Each of the big branches are the questions that Beth told me to ask, and then in green are like the key points from James, and in pink is the key points from Molly. So yeah, the purple is my favourite words and phrases that came to mind as I was doing the mind map, or the lyrics, which are just down here. For me, mind mapping is really important because it allows me to organise my thoughts and pull everything together, especially when you're writing for a particular event or a particular deadline. Sometimes you don't have the inspiration right then and there, and you want to make sure that it's full of the references and full of the stuff that they want to included. So that's why I find a mind map particularly important, especially doing it just before you sit down and you do the poem. But if you've watched my how to write a poem video, you'll know that one of the steps I always do is a free write. For those of you who don't know what that is, a free write is a writing session, usually timed, sometimes with a prompt, where you write without stopping. It doesn't have to be in a particular form, it doesn't have to have any line breaks, or even be grammatically correct. It is an opportunity for your mind to get into a creative flow. And for this poem, I ended up doing 4 separate free writes. Number 1 was 15 minutes just in general. Number 2 was a James to Molly conversation. Number 3 was a Molly to James conversation. I think I spent about 5 to 10 minutes on each one of those. And then number 4 was just another general free write because I forgot to film myself doing it. So please enjoy this lovely B-roll of me doing my free write. Next up was the highlight and the stitching. After my free write, I went through them and highlighted my favourite words and phrases and pulled them together in a poem. This is the bit where I switched to my laptop because it is easier to type up words and lines and move them around. So once I'd pulled together the first draft, I sent it out to other poets for feedback. And because I was actually in my hometown, I read it out loud to my nan, who is really good with words and phrases and gives me good, honest feedback. She is not afraid to tell me if she doesn't like something. That's not to say that she's horrible, but she's very good at being like, no, that phrase doesn't work. So a bit of advice here. Pick people who are going to give you honest feedback. Don't just pick the yes men who are going to be like, oh my god, I love it, no matter what you write, because you need someone that's going to tell you where things can be improved. It's also worth picking someone whose opinions you trust. They don't necessarily have to have your writing style. In fact, I think getting feedback from people who have different writing styles to you works really, really well. So once you've got the feedback, it's time to edit. With my nan's help, I edited it down. This mostly consisted of cutting the poem down to its most crystallised essence. Because it had to be written on a pair of shoes. As I said, Molly has size 3 feet. Bearing in mind that it had to go on a pair of shoes, I wanted to get it cut down to 2 verses, but it was clear that this wasn't going to happen. Mainly because my poem that I'd written had 3 distinct parts to it, and I didn't want to cut one of those parts, but also I couldn't cut the middle verse and stick one half on the first verse and one half on the other one. It just didn't work like that. So I decided to stick with 3 verses, but making those 3 verses as crystalline as possible. And an old English teacher once told me that poetry is the crystallization of a moment. So I thought, yes, let's suck out all of the other bits and just get it down to what it needed to be. When you're editing your poem, think about the context in which it's going to be presented. Are you reading it out at the ceremony? Are you writing it up nicely and framing it? Or is it going to be embroidered onto handkerchiefs? Whatever the context, you need to make sure that your poem fits comfortably within that, and I think the editing process is a very good place to make that happen. Now, you could do what I'm doing, which is allowing your poem to present in multiple contexts. Yes, for the wedding, I wrote it on their shoes, but separately as a different gift, I'm allowing a longer version of the poem and I'm going to write that up nicely and give it to them as a gift to keep. So then I put it on the shoes. The poem is 3 stanzas long. So my plan is, as you look at them, we're going to do stanza 1 on the front, stanza 2 on the front of the other shoe, and then stanza 3 across the back. So I'm probably going to keep the poem itself in black. The title, where the f am I going to put this title? I thought that I wrote short poems until I had to write a poem that fit on a size 3 pair of Vans, and even now I'm worried that this isn't going to work. But we're gonna do it. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. I'm thinking out loud here. This is totally unscripted. Can you tell? Oh. Okay, we're just gonna go for it. Okay, the trainers work great, but I am sweating. I meant to say belly. I'm so nervous, can you tell? Ugh. Gorgeous, wonderful. My particular favourite, dancing break like nobody's watching. Ugh, beautiful. By the way, that might seem cliche, but it's also the lyrics from their wedding song, so now it's time to take pen to shoe. Oh! Josie, you can do this. Everything's fine. It's okay, everything's fine. Why am I explaining this to you when I could just be doing it? Hi Nanny, I wanted to show you how tiny these shoes are. They're like the size of my face, which as feet go is quite small. I am so nervous. Whoo! Chill music on, Josie, you need it. Okay. Whoo! Line 2, done, full stop. Okay, that'll do. Stanza 2, done. I'm so stressed. I need some water. I have had these in my cupboard in my office for well, it got delivered in the first lockdown. I've had these. I could have done this ages ago. Could have been chilled, could have all been dry. No. No? Anyway, come on Josie, stop beating yourself up and just do it. This is my key bit of advice. Give yourself enough time to make mistakes so that you can correct them in time for the event. Okay, so that's how I wrote my poem on a pair of shoes. Here is how the shoes turned out. At the very end of this video, I'm going to read the poem properly out to you. So now on to my audience questions. I was asked what the best thing and the worst thing about this process was. The best thing was definitely being able to catch up with my friends. This process gave me an insight onto their relationship that I just wouldn't have had from being a friend looking in. So being able to have those conversations and gain their insight into their relationship was really cool. And it was really cool to be able to provide such a unique part of their special day. The worst thing was hands down the pressure. To be clear, my pal was no way a bridezilla. All of the pressure was coming from myself onto myself. This definitely wasn't helped by my own terrible time management. But especially when I was writing the poem onto the shoes, I was acutely aware of the pressure to not mess it up. So my next question was it more difficult because it was for a friend? And the answer is yes and no. Certain aspects were easier, certain aspects were more difficult. It was definitely easier to talk to them, and when I was having my conversations with them where I was mining for nuggets of gold for my poem, there was no need to build up extra rapport because I'd already known Molly for a decade and James for 6 years, so the conversation part of it was definitely easier. But it was more difficult, but writing the poem itself was more difficult because I knew their relationship. I have been around their relationship for 6 years, and I had to work very hard to not just put my own perspective of their relationship into the poem. I had to consciously focus on what they wanted to say, not what I wanted to say about it. I guess this relates to a bit of advice that I got given on Twitter, and what I want to share with you now is that these poems are not about you. It's not about me, it's not about my poetry, it's about them and on their special day. So yes, as Beth said in her message, remember that they've asked you to write a poem, so they want you to write in their style, but also know that it's not about your ego, it's about writing a poem for them that they're gonna love. So another question was just generally how I pull the poem together, and hopefully I've answered that through this video, so yeah. Okay guys, enough fannying around, here's the poem itself. This is called Living Like Jack and Sally. We have fit since the day we met. Fate dressed as coincidence. Normality came fast and never went bad. We tumble through this life, each cheering the other on. When the nightmares come, we stitch ourselves back together and keep going. These shoes are made for dogs, dinners, and dancing like nobody's watching. For sitting together, now and forever. So that's the poem, and that's my video on my process of writing a wedding poem. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please share it, and so that other poets can find it if they find it useful as well. As I said, it really helps small channels like me get found. Please comment below if you would like me to do a funeral poem, how to write a wedding speech, or anything else. You got any other requests? Lob them in those comments. If you want to support the channel with your money, you can become a patron. The link to my Patreon is down below. That involves monthly subscriptions, and you get access to all sorts of things such as writing workshops, badges, one-to-one feedback, the works. So the link to do that is down below. But if you're like, monthly money, bit too much for me, you can also buy me a coffee as well. And if you're also like, I don't have any money, Josie, but I really want to support your channel, then you can just share this video or any others that you enjoy on social media. Tell people about me, every little helps, so I'd be grateful for anything. Thank you. Subscribe for more poetry and other things, and I'll see you next week. Bye!